Our next speaker is Denise Tidwell from the National Disease Research Interchange, NDRI, and she's going to tell you about a very important program that we launched this year in collaboration.
Hello. Thank you, June and Dan, for inviting me here to talk to the patients about our collaboration for the FSHD Tissue Donor Registry. It's important, and to be able to talk about it in front of the actual patients is a good thing. Thank you. All right, just to give you a little bit of history and overview of NDRI. So NDRI strives to advance biomedical and bioscience research through the procurement and distribution of tissue, cells, and organs to investigators who are in the cutting edge of research. Who we are. So NDRI was founded in 1980, so we've been around for about 35 years. We are 501c3, a nonprofit organization governed by a board of directors. We have been NIH funded for over 30 years through a U42 grant. Last year, we served about 29,000 biospecimens provided to biomedical scientists per year. And we have been published in about 200 publications using our samples annually. So like I mentioned, we're funded by the NIH for over 30 years through a U42 grant through the Office of Directors. And that funds our core research and biospecimens that we provide to our researchers. So that is made up of all of these NIH organizations that are mentioned on here. Additional funding comes from corporate organizations and contracts that we work with through pharma and biotech industry. But a lot of our funding has been coming through special initiatives such as the FSHD Tissue Registry. Some initiatives that we currently work on, as mentioned earlier, I know cystic fibrosis was one that is working on in the future. So CF, we work with that organization with Vertex Pharmaceuticals, and we provided them with explanted lungs for over 10 years, in which they have recently developed an FDA-approved drug, Kalydeco, that was distributed. Another organization is Jocelyn Medalist Diabetes Project, in which patients with type 1 diabetes who's been asymptomatic for over 50 years will be on this registry, and we procure tissues for them and provide them to a biorepository. Another special project is a Children's Tumor Foundation, in which patients with neurofibromatosis, which is a tumor that attacks the spinal cord and other nerves of the body, that is another patient registry that we work with and provide that to a biorepository. And then the FSH Society has come to us in 2015, in which we're trying to register patients in which we can recover muscle samples in order to put them in a biobank and provide them to researchers in the future. So for NDRI, tissue requests typically fall into two categories. Standard requests, in which we falls into whole eyes, solid organs, tissue, bank specimens, or surgical specimens. But we also have these custom project requests in which targeted sourcing may be needed. It's been considered a special initiative because it does not fall into our standard procedures. Potentially enhanced donor data is needed, or a recovery protocol that needs additional specifics is needed. So that falls under our custom project request. Services that we typically provide is recruitment of clients and researchers. We develop specific protocols based on donor profiles and parameters. Project management is typically provided on special initiatives in which an organization is not familiar with such. We tend to coordinate logistics for the procurement, distribution, and shipment of tissues, which follow IATA, which is the International Air Transport Association, and IRB and UAGA, which is the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act procedures. We maintain compliance through those organizations, as well as we have a quality management system in which document control and problem management is managed. Once a researcher comes to NDRI, we typically start with the application. In that process, we determine your tissue needs and a donor profile of interest. An IRB documentation or exemption is typically required, as well as a project synopsis and a CV or biosketch. The next step is a feasibility review, which is an internal process. We determine if whether or not your project fits into that standard request or it is a special initiative. And also, some projects are reviewed by an external scientific advisory committee to determine the validity of your science. After that, a customized protocol is developed and activated for recovery and distribution. So in authorizing and consenting patients, NDRI goes through an IRB governed by the University of Pennsylvania. So these authorizations typically have language that asks if for-profit is acceptable. It mentions therapeutics and diagnostics. May mention genome sequencing. It mentions that payment to the donor is typically not an issue, and potential access to complete health records may be something required. For expanded authorization forms, such as ones for special initiatives, we typically put in language such as project-specific IRB approval for specific sites. We may mention that there's unknown uses for the future tissues, and that cell line development, such as unlimited future use of the tissues, will be used. We mentioned that the right to withdraw limits is an option, as well as incorporate additional objectives, such as product development, and addresses the risks and loss of identity potentially through genotyping. Key matrix for 2015. So we go through our 24/7 call center. We get about 58,000 donation referrals. So those who do not meet the criteria to be able to provide transplant tissues, research is an option. So from those 58,000 referrals, 29,000 tissues were actually placed with researchers. 4,600 typically were diseased, and 82 diseases were covered under that, and 500 researchers were served. Our main focus or our main tissue procurements are normal controls, normal samples, but we are increasing in disease samples and rare diseases. So donor profiles that we typically see or recover from are transplant donors, such as organ, tissues, and eye banks, living patients in which surgical discard or explanted tissues are recovered after scapular surgery, patients participating in clinical studies. We typically register those patients as well in order to recover tissues on them. So we do all of this through our nationwide network. We work with about 56 organ procurement organizations, tissue banks, 43 hospitals, eye banks, and 150 recovery personnel. So recovery personnel are the ones that we assign to specific projects with each patient that once a donation plan is activated, they are the recovery technician that goes and do the recovery and ships off the tissues for us. So we have those located all over the United States that we are contracted with. So a little bit more about our private donor program. So what we do is we typically obtain consent through an authorized consenting personnel in our organization. We create and maintain these donor registries through project management and develop a donation plan specific to each patient that is registered. We coordinate all the aspects of the donation event so that once an event occurs, it can easily be activated since a recovery personnel facility and kit materials are already in place. And then we shipment of the donated tissues to the activated researchers that we pre-registered and have their profiles and protocols developed. So how does this work with patient advocacy groups? So the PAGs or patient refers donors to us. So we typically get the patient information from, for instance, FSHD. We maintain the patient's information in a secure database. The researchers who come to us who are interested in those tissues, we register those researchers. The patient advocacy group or physician is notified about the recovery, so we make sure that that is in place, and we kind of keep track of that. And then we do the coordination of the recovery. So once a family or a surgery is notified of us, we kind of go through we activate the plan and the process. So for the FSHD tissue recovery donor registry, about in 2014, a survey went out to the research community as well as patients, and there was an interest in biospecimens to do some research on, and there was an interest in patients who said they would be willing to donate. From that survey, we activated this program in which we developed an FSHD specific authorization form, as well as a brochure which outlines the program as well as the benefit of donating tissues, as well as a questionnaire which kind of identifies specific questions in which you can register for the project. FSHD identifies the patients and NDRI consents these patients, and then the donation options such as post-surgical or post-mortem are identified and explained to the patients who are registered. If you are interested in registering, please feel free to contact me. We're located in Philadelphia, but I have my contact information here, or you can contact the FSH Society and they can contact us. But thank you very much for FSH Society for working with us on this project. Thank you.